I'm Chris McLeod. I'm the National Aboriginal Bishop for Australia. I am an Aboriginal man of Gurindji descent. My mother, Margaret, was a member of the Stolen Generations. She was removed from her mother when she was just a young child. She was placed in an orphanage and then eventually brought down to Adelaide. My grandmother, Margaret's mother, Dolly, was also Stolen Generation. A Gurindji woman placed in a home in Darwin and sadly died when she was only in her 20s. Well, I think I was like most people. I was watching the events unfold in the United States around George Floyd. And like most people, I watched the video of the arrest. I watched the video of him dying. And I was just so appalled by the whole thing. And I was really quite moved. And then I thought, along with other people, I thought, well, we have this problem too. It's not something that's just confined to the United States of America. And people were saying, well, thank God we live here in Australia and not there. And so I thought, well, no. We have this problem here. It's just we sweep it under the carpet. We don't talk about it. We pretend like Australia hasn't ever had this problem or this history. And then statements started to come up. And I thought, well, as National Aboriginal Bishop, I had to say something. And I thought about what is it I should say. And so I wrote what I thought I should say. I spent some time thinking about it, talking with people, and thinking, what is it that I should say? So I wrote what I thought I should say. But I just didn't want to say things about Aboriginal deaths in custody just as if it had nothing to do with the church. You know, that was just sort of a comment for the wider society. I wanted to also say that we in the church have this problem too. You know, that we in the church have a blindness to our own racism in the church. And so I wanted to say as well that if the church is really going to speak with integrity about Black Lives Matter and speak with integrity about any issues around social justice, then we actually had to look at ourselves as well. So we actually had to confront our own racism, and who better, I guess, than me to say it. I think one of the main issues for the church, but also for the wider society, is to actually listen to what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are saying. I think often the church has been well-meaning and has made decisions for and about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. But I think the real issues are listening to what we have to say. And I think that's the issues around Black Lives Matter as well, is listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and people of colour around the world saying, here are the issues we face on a daily basis. Listen to us about this. So that really is my message to the church. Listen to what Aboriginal people have to say. Yeah, I think it is systematic racism. And I think we need to understand what that is quite clearly. Because if you call something racist, or if you suggest to somebody that their statement or their activity is racist, they will take automatic offence. they will say, and probably quite naturally and reasonably say, well, actually I'm not racist, I don't think racist thoughts about people. But I think if we think about what systemic racism is about, it's about viewing people from a particular perspective in which they've inherited it. So most people are not aware that they're viewing Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people and other people of colour through what I would call the lens of whiteness. So they're viewing people from what they have taken to be normative, to be normal. And so it's just a given. And so people are just viewing things from how they see as being perfectly normal and correct, not realising that they've actually been part of that system and born into it, and often had no choice themselves. But this is the way we look at the world. And we look at the world, I would say, through white eyes. So everything that comes from white society is regarded as being normal and right. And so it's unable to see when there is racism, because after all, this is right, this is normal. So, the right thing for people to do is how I see things. So that's why it's incredibly important for people to actually hear what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are saying through their eyes. How do they see the world? The world is not exactly the same as people would see it from through the white lens. Well, I think that the reality is, yes, most people don't know too many Indigenous people. Indigenous people make up 3.5% of the Australian population. And in many parts of where we live, Aboriginal people are not necessarily our neighbours, not necessarily living alongside us. There's not a lot of Aboriginal people who come to our churches. And so, in a sense, it's perfectly, normal and not to come across too many Aboriginal people in our day-to-day life. But having said that, there are Aboriginal people in our communities everywhere. I think what people can do if they haven't got natural relationships with Aboriginal people in their community is to develop a knowledge about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And do that by reading, do that by watching movies at cinema that have Aboriginal themes to them, do it by watching NITV, do it by being attentive to art shows and performances. I think there's lots of different ways in which people can connect with Aboriginal people through those sorts of mediums. Taking part in rallies, taking part in protests, taking part in listening to what Aboriginal church groups have to say. So really just sort of people are trying to get in contact in natural ways with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, traditions, and what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are saying about different issues. I think the first thing is what I said earlier about listening. So listening to what Aboriginal people have to say in the variety of ways. That's the first thing. So listening, not speaking. And the second thing, I think, because the issues are largely around racism confronting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, in particular around Black Lives Matter. This is where the average person in the church can actually say quite a lot. One, by being aware of systemic racism in our own lives. And two, confronting racism when we hear it. I think we've all been in contexts where somebody has said something racist, and we've often just kept quiet. Well, I'd like to see, the average person in the church just say, hang on, no, I'm not going to listen to that. And here are the reasons why I'm not going to listen. I think also when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the church and outside the church come to the church and say, here's some things we really want the church to take seriously, then I think we take them seriously. And not come up with sort of reasons why we shouldn't take them seriously. All sorts of reasons that we're all very good at finding reasons why we can't do that. But I think the church, if it just stopped, didn't say anything, listen, and then take it seriously. I think the signs of flourishing will be that we have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as a natural part of our church life. So not sort of the exception, not those who sort of stand out, but they're actually part of our church life. They're part of our everyday life and our activities. So I think that would be one sign. Another sign is that we have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in senior leadership positions within the church. So it's become just a natural thing to have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in senior positions. We already have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander clergy who are in charge of what we might call mainstream parishes. But that's a positive step. So they're not seen as the exception, but the norm. But I think what we also have in various parts of Australia, and certainly within our communities, in our cities, we have Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people separated from the rest of the community. So I think in time, when we see flourishing, is we see those groups coming more together, not diluting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture by any means, not assimilation, but people coming together, retaining their own culture and identity, but being accepted, full and equal in that community or church setting. One of the great benefits of travelling across Australia is to seeing the rich diversity of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. And I think one of the dangers that we often have is we just put Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people into one group, and we don't recognise there is quite a lot of difference. And so one of the things that I appreciate and value is the diversity across Australia. So I'm also aware that no single Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person can speak for the whole group, and I certainly can't. And so it's important that we listen to those unique voices within the different communities. So we have some very strong voices, I think, that are important to listen to. And I would say the first group of people to listen to is the National Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Anglican Council, NATSIA. It's the official voice within the Anglican Church of Australia of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. That's the official voice. So we have a diverse group of people travelling from all over Australia, coming together, in which we spend time together and shaping opinions that matter for the church. So I think that's a really important group because you have so much rich diversity and knowledge and experience and just general knowledge about what it means to be an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander person in Australia today, and an Anglican in that context as well. So that would be my first group that I would talk to. I think it should be. I'm always a bit wary about appropriation And so I'm wary of people taking over Indigenous theology rather than sort of sitting at its feet, so to speak. So I think we do have to be careful that we're not just taking from Aboriginal culture. So I think it's important that when we do teach Indigenous theology, we're aware of that. It's a gift, not a right. And we also need to be aware that, doing Indigenous theology as an Indigenous person is different than being a non-Indigenous person learning from Indigenous theology. So I think that there needs to be a little bit of caution, but I think there also needs to be, certainly needs to be offered to help the church to see what the Christian faith looks like from an Indigenous perspective. But I also think it's important that within theological reflection, there's a serious consideration of how colonialism has shaped our thinking, how systemic racism has shaped our thinking, how some of the more negative sides of the missionary movement has shaped our thinking. So I think there needs to be a fair amount of sort of within our own theological unpacking, a little bit of sort of self-critical awareness of how our theologies come together. I would say, no, I wouldn't agree with that. No, I wouldn't agree with that. But what I would say, that I think there are always elements within culture, whether it be Indigenous culture or whether it be non-Indigenous culture, which are incompatible with the gospel. So I would always say that we do need to be critical of what we accept. And I think that's as true for the non-Indigenous church as it is for the Indigenous church. And I think the problem is that we are so often blind to our own cultural biases that we just take them and accept them. And we're so used to having them being part of our lives that we don't critique them. And so I would say that there's no tension between many things within the Aboriginal culture and the Christian gospel. But I would also say that it's not up to the non-Indigenous people to critique what is acceptable and what isn't. There's enough Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Christians around who are able to critique our own culture without having to be corrected by others. So I think it would be a case of not just rejecting everything, but talking to the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander people about what is appropriate in terms of culture and the gospel. Having said that as well, I would also say that in some settings, some Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people say this aspect of our culture is not appropriate here, and so we should respect that. So I think my bottom line is really having a posture of respect and listening again to what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are saying. There is a bit of having to search it out a little bit, and we probably don't have as many people on the ground in that area as we need to. So it is an emerging thing. But I do think as well that many people would do well just to tap into what's being offered through our secular universities. So I know here in Adelaide, the Adelaide University, and in particular University of South Australia, has a very good Aboriginal Studies department. So I would encourage people not just to think exclusively in terms of theology, but also to tap into those university departments which have had a long history. And there's so much we can learn from just tapping into that. And so I would encourage people to sort of do their own theology in a way, but also tap into what's being offered and has been offered really for decades, which I don't think we've taken advantage of. It is. I think it's a great thing to do, and I think we could do more of that in different places. I think that is a very important thing for people to have a cultural awareness. So to have that experience is important, and I think, and people like me can take responsibility for it. I think we can sort of set up those sorts of things in various states where we are. And so that we can introduce groups to the Aboriginal culture of where we are. And I think that's an important thing to do. Well, it was such a powerful statement. And it was passionate, and it was heartfelt, and it really was really mesmerising. And I think a lot of people responded so well to it. And here we have a young person with such a strong voice, speaking so clearly about what matters. And I thought it was just incredible, really. And I think this is the power of this moment, that we can stop and listen. Well, I mean, yes, I get all lives matter. And by saying Black Lives Matter, we are saying all lives matter. I think jumping quickly from Black Lives Matter, or ignoring that completely, and then jumping straight to all lives matter, is really a diversionary technique. So, all lives matter. And then the problem with that is it can be just generic, disengaged, and ultimately nobody's life matters. One of the things that strikes me about the scriptures, the Bible, and all the stories running through the Bible, the Old Testament and the stories in the New Testament, are stories about people. And they're stories that are focused on people. Jesus, for example, takes up a little child, one little child, takes the little child. Now we can say that all children matter, but Jesus takes that little child. And then in taking that little child, he is saying all children matter. But by focusing on these individual stories, it enables us to sort of encapsulate the universal. So when it comes to Black Lives Matter, it's because that is the story we need to focus on now. But we also need to focus on domestic violence. We also need to focus on the prevention of abuse of children. We also need to focus on violence in general. But we need to focus on Black Lives Matter because that is what's before us now. And focusing on that helps us, I think, ultimately to focus on all the other things that need our attention. Well, I've often thought about that. What would I say? What have I said? And I think experience is the best teacher. I've come down to that thinking that if you are able to see things through the eyes of somebody else, it really does change the way you think. I can preach at people, I can lecture people, I can say things in a provocative way, but ultimately, unless people actually walk in the shoes of someone else, they don't really see it or grasp it. And I do know of a number of people who have actually taken themselves out of their comfort zone and placed themselves in a context and begin to see something completely differently. So I would like to take people who hold on to racist views, often unconsciously, and say, come and experience this. Come and have a look at life from a different angle and then see what you think. I have. I think the fortunate thing is that I don't get a lot of it directly because I'm not dark-skinned. But I certainly get it casually. And I get it in a number of ways. When I was a prison chaplain and visiting the jails, and I would visit Aboriginal prisoners in jail, very occasionally a prison guard would say, why are you bothering with those people? You know, using the words that people use to describe Aboriginal people. I think, wow, that's just such a racist comment. And in other ways too, some people have said in the past, well, why do I identify as an Aboriginal person? Why couldn't I just pass off as being a white person? Because ultimately that would be better. And I think, well, why would I do that? Why wouldn't I be proud of my Aboriginal identity? And then, of course, there's always somebody who finds out you're Aboriginal and then wants to tell you an Aboriginal joke. Why would I want to hear an Aboriginal joke? And I'm sure people from other cultural backgrounds get exactly the same. So it's there, and you see it all through Australia. We encountered it with the Adam Goods situation, and again, systemic racism and people making justifications for it. So it's there, and it happens within our churches, it happens in all our communities.
for it now, and praise for it, praise for it, praise for it, praise for it, praise for it now. And we see the light coming fast, coming fast. We see the light coming fast, and we feel the hope come at last, come at last. We feel